I ask the proceedings of the quorum be this read.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to offer an amendment to the legislation that we're working on that would make sure that security clearances are revoked on a going forward basis only for valid national security reasons, not to change the subject on a bad news day, not to threaten career government employees, and especially not to carry out political retribution. Mr. President, Virginia is home to tens of thousands of dedicated men and women who serve in our intelligence and defense communities. Over the years, as Senator and Vice Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, I've met literally thousands of FBI agents, CIA officers, military service members, contractors, and other public servants who hold security clearances. These men and women work day in and day out, often thanklessly, to keep America safe. And you know what? I have no idea amongst those Americans who have those security clearances which of them are Democrats and which of them are Republicans. And that's the way our system is supposed to work. The federal government grants security clearances only to those individuals who can be trusted with our nation's secrets. Applicants go through intense, lengthy background checks, interviews, and even, in many cases, lie detector tests, not to mention extensive rechecks for suitability every few years. Only then, after this process, do we allow them to serve in some of the toughest intelligence and national security jobs. Mr. President, we ask a great deal of these dedicated professionals, but what we don't ask is about their political views. Now, since the mid-1990s, the Code of Federal Regulations has governed the 13 criteria under which personnel are deemed eligible or ineligible for a security clearance and access to classified information. Amongst those 13 reasons to actually get a security clearance or lose a security clearance include allegiance to the United States, being subjects of foreign influence, financial considerations, and others. When you look through that list of 13, and I've got it over here, none of those criteria include political speech, nor should they. Our national security is too important to inflect with political partisanship. I believe that more than ever in light of the President's actions last week, when this President revoked the clearance of former CIA Director Brennan, and equally important, if not more important, threatened to revoke the clearance of numerous former and even current national security professionals. These individuals collectively have hundreds of years of honorable service to our country under their belts. No one can seriously question their fitness or loyalty to this country. Unfortunately, what happened last week, and unfortunately happens too many times out of this White House, what we know happened last week is really all about politics. According to media reports, White House officials have discussed how to issue the revocations on a going-forward basis to other enumerated individuals to distract from bad news stories. Now, I hope those reports of the White House's plans are mistaken. But true or not, we need to only listen to the words of this President to know these efforts are politically motivated. I'll admit I had missed the widely publicized press event where the White House announced the President's quote-unquote enemies list, but anyone who looks at this list will notice some common factors. They all served in the previous administration, and in the time since, several have exercised their First Amendment right to criticize this President or his policies. Many of those on the list have also had some involvement in the investigation into Russia's assault on our democracy in 2016. And for that, for that, in many cases doing their job, they're now being punished or potentially punished by this president and this White House. In the president's own words, and I quote, "These people let it, so I think it's something that had to be done," unquote. This is truly a dangerous precedent. For the first time since President Eisenhower created the security clearance process as we know it, the President of the United States is abusing one of his most important national security tools to punish his political opponents. As somebody mentioned, one of my friends from on the other side of the aisle, something that would more be akin to something coming out of a banana republic. But perhaps even more troubling is the message this president is sending to those currently serving in government service. I think it's pretty clear. He's sending a message that says, think twice before working on anything that this president doesn't like. Think twice before you express a political opinion, even if it's in private. The White House broadcast this message loud and clear when it threatened to revoke the clearance of a mid-level employee of the Department of Justice. Mr. President, this is a clear attempt at intimidating others in the bureaucracy. And if this president is successful in revoking this first wave of clearances, there's no question it will threaten the ongoing Russia investigation. An investigation that, again, today claimed 2 more guilty convictions. An investigation that has already resulted prior to today in 5 guilty pleas and 35 indictments. And as I mentioned, today included the conviction of the president's campaign manager. Unfortunately, the president's actions don't just harm the individuals involved. These tactics threaten our national security institutions themselves. The Pentagon, the intelligence community, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the rest of our national security structures depend on seasoned career professionals who do not act out of partisan motivations. Threatening their clearances threatens their livelihoods and their families. This is a clear attempt at undermining an ongoing, legitimate criminal investigation into what Russia did in 2016. And if successful, the president's actions threaten to politicize our national security institutions even more so than he's already done. Now, the president has significant authority as head of the executive branch, but there is widespread agreement that he should not be able to use these powers to get payback against Americans who criticize him. Now, all of us in this body all agree that no president should be able to order the IRS to audit political enemies. And we all agree that no president should be able to order wiretaps against those who displease him. We should also all agree that a president should not have the power to remove clearances for reasons that have nothing to do with national security. And certainly not because an individual expresses his or her right to free speech. Mr. President, I ask my colleagues to support the Warner Amendment. I ask the Majority Leader to make sure this amendment gets a fair vote up or down on the floor of the Senate, because I believe this Senate must take a stand against any attempts to punish political speech or to threaten our national security professionals by arbitrarily taking away their security clearances. We currently have in place real and prudent guidelines for issuing and revoking clearances, guidelines that are based on national security and not on political considerations. We cannot allow those to be supplemented by crass partisanships or attempt by this president to punish his enemies. We've come way too far from the dark days of Watergate to allow this type of attack against career professionals who faithfully served our nation with honor and dignity. We should demand better from this president. We can take that action by passing this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back.